You think I'm going to fall for that? He sneered. Translate this and my salary is yours. The millionaire laughed, leaning back in his chair. But the look on his face wasn't a joke. It was a mockery. He thought she was too simple, too invisible to understand. And then she did. She looked at the page, barely glancing at him, and answered, her voice steady and calm. His jaw dropped. If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's get into it. Jessie had worked for Mr. Harper for almost 2 years. She had seen him in every mood possible. Charming when he was hosting, cold when he thought no one was looking, and distant when his mind drifted away into his endless list of meetings and investments. His mansion was pristine, every inch of it a testament to his wealth. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, he had it all. And she? She had nothing more than her uniform, her cleaning supplies, and the stories she told herself about what her life could be. She was the maid, the help, invisible. Every morning, she woke up before dawn, put on her uniform, and made her way through the back door of the mansion, the same door she always used. No one saw her come in, no one saw her leave. That's how she liked it. Her life wasn't full of shiny objects or fancy dinners. It was about getting by. She did her job, cleaned the rooms, folded the towels, wiped down the counters. She wasn't there to make an impression. She was there to clean, to serve. It was just another Wednesday morning when it happened. Mr. Harper was sitting in his office as usual, his expensive suit pressed to perfection, papers scattered across his desk. Jessie had been dusting the living room, her soft footsteps barely audible on the thick carpets, when she heard the sound of his deep, arrogant voice echoing down the hall. "Jessie!" he called, sounding as though he hadn't remembered her name until just that moment. She straightened up quickly, smoothing her hands down her apron before stepping toward his office. "Yes, Mr. Harper?" she asked quietly, standing in the doorway. He looked up, a smirk on his lips. He'd been in a meeting, but now he had something else in mind, something small, something that would amuse him. Jessie was always a little too quiet, a little too unremarkable in his eyes. She was just a maid after all. "You speak Spanish, right?" He didn't wait for her response. "I need you to translate something for me, a phrase. If you can do it, I'll give you my salary for the month. You think you can handle it?" Jessie blinked, unsure if he was serious or just toying with her. He had a habit of making fun of people without them even realizing it. But there was a challenge in his eyes, one that she wasn't about to ignore. She nodded, though she had a sinking feeling in her stomach. "Sure, Mr. Harper. What's the phrase?" He leaned forward, a wicked glint in his eyes. "Translate this. La vida no es muy por la cantidad de respiros que tomamos, sino por los momentos que nos dan sin aliento." Jessie paused, the words unfamiliar. She didn't recognize the phrase, but she had an innate ability to translate with accuracy, despite not having formal training. She didn't let her hesitation show, though. She took a deep breath and spoke. "Life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away." She looked up from the paper, meeting his gaze. The room was silent for a moment. The millionaire stared at her, his eyes widening. Jessie could see the surprise in his face, the sudden shift from amusement to something deeper, something he wasn't expecting. This wasn't how he thought this would go. "Wait, what?" His voice was a little more than a whisper. Jessie didn't smile or gloat. She simply nodded. "I know Spanish, Mr. Harper. Is there anything else you need?" For a moment he didn't answer. He just looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. She could feel the shift in the air, a subtle crack in the power dynamic that had always been so clear between them. "Well," he began, clearing his throat, his confidence returning in full force. "I guess you didn't just clean up around here. You've got a sharp mind, Jessie." Jessie felt a strange tightening in her chest. He hadn't meant it as a compliment. It was just another remark, another brush off, but it still stung. She had known he would think she couldn't do it. And now, here she was, having done it without breaking a sweat. She turned away from him, careful not to let her face betray any emotion. "Thank you, Mr. Harper," she said, her voice steady. "I'll finish my work now." She didn't need his salary. She didn't need any of it. But something had shifted, even if just for a moment. She wasn't just the maid anymore. Jessie walked back down the hallway, her footsteps feeling louder now. She passed the grand staircase, the expensive vases and framed paintings lining the walls. It all felt so out of place. She didn't belong here, not really. But for a second, when Mr. Harper had looked at her like that, like he hadn't expected her to be anything more than what he'd assumed, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was something more than invisible. But neither of them knew. This was only the beginning. It was late afternoon when the collision happened. Jessie was just finishing her usual round of cleaning when she heard footsteps behind her. Mr. Harper. Of course. She hadn't expected him to leave her alone for long. He had a way of showing up unexpectedly, always with something new for her to do. But today there was something different in his walk. More purpose behind each step. The door to the study opened, and she glanced up. He didn't look like the same man she'd seen earlier that morning. There was something frantic in his eyes. It made Jessie pause, her dusting rag still in her hand. "Jessie." His voice was tight, strained. "Can you come here for a second? I need to talk to you." Her heart skipped a beat. It was rare for him to ask her directly. He often gave orders through his assistant or left her with menial tasks. But this was different. Something was off. She set the rag down and stepped into the study. The rich leather chairs, the sleek desk, the expensive bookshelves. They all felt like a world she could never really touch. But today, they felt like the walls of a prison, enclosing her as she stepped inside. "Sit down," he said, his voice much quieter now. Jessie hesitated for a moment but then complied, taking a seat across from him. She couldn't quite shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He was staring at his desk, his fingers tapping nervously on the surface. Jessie could feel the tension in the room, thick and heavy, like the air before a storm. He wasn't meeting her eyes, and it made her uneasy. "Is everything okay, Mr. Harper?" she asked, her voice calm, though she felt a knot tightening in her stomach. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for a piece of paper, and then without warning, he pushed it across the desk toward her. The paper was stamped with a logo she didn't recognize. The words "Confidential" printed in bold letters at the top. Jessie took the paper, glancing at it briefly. It was a letter written in Spanish. But this wasn't just any letter. It was a legal document. Her brow furrowed as she read the first few lines. The letter was an offer, a settlement of some sort. Her eyes moved over the words, confusion setting in. "Mr. Harper, I don't understand." She looked up at him. "Why are you showing me this?" He exhaled sharply, his hand running through his hair. I've been having some issues with the company. Legal issues. It's complicated, but I need this letter translated. I can't risk anyone else seeing it." Jessie's heart began to race. It wasn't just the challenge of translating it. It was the fact that Mr. Harper was trusting her with something so private, something so important. He had a lot of money, a lot of power, and yet here he was asking for her help. "Why me?" she asked, not trying to hide the surprise in her voice. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze finally meeting hers. For the first time, Jessie saw something different in his eyes, vulnerability. Something she had never imagined could exist behind his confident, self-assured mask. "Because I've seen you," he said quietly. "I saw how you translated that phrase earlier. You didn't just get the words right. You understood them. And now I need that kind of understanding. This is important." Jessie was silent for a moment. The weight of his words settled on her chest like a heavy stone. She had always known she was capable of more than cleaning his house. But this felt like something entirely different. She glanced back down at the paper. The words swam in front of her eyes, but her mind sharpened. She could do this. It was a simple matter of translation, really, but it wasn't just about getting the words right. It was about understanding the weight of those words, about capturing the meaning in a way that would matter. She felt a small spark of something inside her, a flicker of pride. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was trusted. She was needed. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. He looked at her, eyes wide, and for a moment, Jesse wasn't sure if he believed her. But then he nodded. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. As Jessie took the paper in her hands and began to read through it again, she couldn't help but feel a strange shift between them. It wasn't just the words on the paper that had changed. It was something about the way he was looking at her, the way he wasn't seeing her as the maid anymore, but as someone who could help him, someone who had something to offer. But the shift wasn't all positive. There was something else behind his eyes, something that made her uneasy. Power. He still held the upper hand. He still controlled everything. And yet, for the first time, Jesse wasn't sure he was in control of himself. Pride is a liar, and theirs was about to cost them everything. The following days felt like a blur to Jessie. She had returned to her usual routine, dusting, mopping, scrubbing the floors of Mr. Harper's mansion. But this time, everything was different. Every time she stepped into a room, her mind drifted back to the translation, the trust he had shown her, the challenge that had shifted everything. The problem was, she didn't know what to do with it. She couldn't trust it. She had expected Mr. Harper to change, maybe to act differently toward her after she helped him with that legal document. She had expected him to show more appreciation, maybe even a little respect. But he didn't. Instead, things returned to how they were. Distant, cold. Mr. Harper was still the same. He still walked past her without a second glance, like she was just part of the furniture. When she saw him, he barely acknowledged her. And when he did, his words felt like they were only there to serve his convenience. Jessie had told herself that maybe she was expecting too much, that the trust he had shown her was a one-time thing. Maybe he hadn't seen anything in her after all. The problem was, Jessie wasn't sure she could go back to being the same woman who had lived in the shadows of this house. She wasn't sure she could go back to being invisible. One afternoon, after cleaning the study for the third time that week, she saw him standing by the window, his back to her. His posture was tense, and for a moment, she didn't know if she should say something or just leave. The house felt too quiet, the silence too thick between them. "Mr. Harper," she called, her voice tentative. He turned slowly, his gaze flicking over her before settling on the floor. "Yes." His voice was casual, distant. Jessie hesitated, then walked into the room. She folded her arms over her chest, trying to find the words. I finished the translation like you asked. It's ready." For a moment, Mr. Harper didn't respond. He just stood there, his hand resting on the back of the chair. Then, without looking at her, he waved a hand dismissively. "That's fine. I'll look at it later." Jessie's stomach tightened. Was he serious? After all that had happened? She had expected him to at least acknowledge the effort, maybe even show some gratitude. But instead, he treated it like it was nothing. It hurt. She wanted to walk out of the room, to disappear again, but she didn't. Not this time. "Mr. Harper," she said again, her voice firmer now. "You asked me to help. I did. And I know this is important to you. So, what happens now?" He paused, looking at her finally. There was a flicker of something that almost looked like guilt, but it vanished before she could fully grasp it. He straightened his back, his expression hardening. "I'll take care of it, Jessie. Don't worry about it. You did your job. Now go finish the rest." She felt a knot form in her chest. That was it. It was the same. Nothing had changed. He still saw her as the maid, the help, just someone to do his bidding. She wasn't a person to him. Not really. And that hurt more than she expected. But she couldn't let him see it. She couldn't let him see how badly his indifference had cut her. She simply nodded, turning on her heel and walking out of the room. The next few days were quieter than usual. Jessie went about her cleaning as always, keeping her head down, avoiding Mr. Harper when she could. He seemed to prefer it that way. He was busy, and he never made an effort to engage with her. Jessie couldn't help but feel a growing sense of resentment. She had let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, There was something more between them. Maybe he had seen her as something beyond the maid, someone with value. But now she realized how foolish that had been. He had gotten what he wanted. He had gotten his translation. And that was it. She kept telling herself that it didn't matter, that she didn't need his approval. But the truth was, it did matter. It always mattered. Meanwhile, Mr. Harper was fighting his own battle. He hadn't expected to feel so conflicted. When he had first asked Jessie to translate the document, it had been a challenge, a simple way to pass the time. He hadn't expected her to be so competent, so intelligent. It had shaken him. He had thought of her as nothing more than a maid, just another face in the crowd of his employees. But after what had happened, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not just because of the translation. It was the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence. There was something about her that unsettled him, something that made him feel like he was losing control. And that was the problem. He liked control. He had tried to ignore the shift between them, to pretend that nothing had changed. But it had. And now he couldn't decide what to do about it. Every time he saw her, a part of him wanted to reach out, to acknowledge her, to ask her how she was doing. But another part of him, his pride, held him back. He couldn't show weakness. He couldn't show that she had affected him. And so he did what he knew best. He pretended it was nothing. He pretended she was still just the maid. But deep down he knew he was lying. To himself. To her. She saw it then, the fracture in his armor. And it terrified her. It was late afternoon when it happened. The kind of quiet that settled over the mansion like dust. Jessie was in the kitchen, wiping down counters, her mind drifting between the rhythmic motions of her cleaning. She'd been trying to push the growing tension between her and Mr. Harper to the back of her mind, trying to pretend that nothing had changed even though it had. Then the call came. Jessie was just about to walk out of the kitchen when she heard Mr. Harper's voice from the hallway. She froze, her hand still holding the rag, unsure of what to do. He wasn't supposed to be home this early. Usually, he didn't return until after dinner. "Jessie, can you come here for a second?" His voice echoed down the hall. Jessie's heart raced, and she tried to shake the feeling that had been creeping up on her. She wasn't sure why his voice made her nervous now, but it did. He'd asked her to do things before, translate this, clean that, but today felt different. He was asking for something more. She grabbed her cleaning supplies and walked cautiously down the hall, her footsteps slow against the marble floor. She knew she couldn't avoid him forever. Sooner or later, they'd have to face whatever had been building between them. When she entered the study, Mr. Harper was standing by the window, his phone in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. He looked over at her, his expression unreadable. "Close the door," he said. She did as he asked, feeling the cold, heavy silence fill the space between them. "Is everything all right?" Jessie asked, her voice soft but carrying a hint of concern. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked over to his desk and set the papers down before looking at her. There was something about the way he held himself, something guarded. "Sit down," he said. Jessie hesitated but then complied, sitting in the chair across from his desk. Her heart beat a little faster, unsure of where this was going. "I need your help with something," he said, rubbing his forehead like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. "I don't know who else I can trust right now." Jessie didn't speak, just waiting for him to continue. She had learned a long time ago that when it came to Mr. Harper, it was best to stay silent and let him talk. "I'm in a bind," he continued, his voice tight. "There's a big meeting coming up with some investors, and I need to prepare for it. The legal documents are in Spanish. I can't handle it right now. I got too much on my plate. I need you to help me go over everything. Translate it, make sure I don't miss anything. I know I'm asking a lot, but I really don't have anyone else." Jessie looked at him for a moment, trying to read his face. She had expected him to ask for something related to his business. But this? It was different. The desperation in his eyes was real. It wasn't just an inconvenience for him. He was truly overwhelmed. She nodded, not wanting to seem too eager, but she knew this was an opportunity she couldn't turn down. "I'll help, of course." He exhaled, relieved, and for a brief second, their eyes met, and the tension between them shifted. It wasn't just about the task now. There was something else in the air, something Jesse wasn't sure how to name. "I'll send the files to your office," he said, stepping toward the door. "We'll work together tomorrow." Before Jesse could respond, he was already walking out, disappearing down the hallway. The next morning, Jessie arrived early to the mansion. She usually did, of course, but today was different. Today, she had a new task, one that would keep her in Mr. Harper's presence for the better part of the day. And she couldn't shake the feeling that this would change everything. She set up in the small office just off the kitchen, where she could work in peace. The legal documents were laid out before her, the Spanish words almost blurring into one continuous stream. But she focused, diving into the work. As she translated the documents, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. Mr. Harper's trust in her, his reliance on her, felt heavy. She had never been the kind of person to seek recognition, but now, with every word she translated, she couldn't ignore the way her heart raced. She wasn't just doing her job anymore. She was part of his world. Several hours passed, and just as she was about to take a break, Mr. Harper appeared in the doorway, looking at her with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "How's it going?" he asked, his tone softer than usual. Jessie looked up, surprised by the genuine curiosity in his voice. "I'm making good progress," she replied. "You're asking for a lot of technical language, but I think I'm on track." He stepped into the room, his gaze lingering on the papers. "I knew I could count on you." She offered a small, polite smile, but something inside her stirred. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he was standing there, the way he was looking at her, like she mattered. He was close now, standing just a few feet away from her. Jessie could feel the heat radiating off his body, the closeness pulling her focus in a way she hadn't expected. She quickly looked away, pretending to adjust the papers. "I'm going to make some coffee," he said, his voice low. "You want some?" Jessie nodded, though she wasn't sure if it was the coffee she wanted. He turned and left the room, and Jessie let out a slow breath. When Mr. Harper returned with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, the atmosphere between them was different. The space that had once felt familiar, distant but professional, was now filled with something more, something heavier, something personal. He handed her the coffee, his fingers brushing hers for a moment longer than necessary. Jessie's breath caught in her throat, and she quickly looked down at her mug. "Thank you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Of course," he replied, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged. Jessie knew they couldn't keep dancing around the tension. It was there, unspoken, undeniable, and it terrified her. The truth has a way of finding light, even when you've buried it in the dark. The days following their time together in the office were awkward. There was a palpable shift between Jessie and Mr. Harper, something neither of them wanted to acknowledge. The small touches, accidental or not, lingered in the air. The silence that followed felt heavy, charged, like the calm before a storm. Jessie tried to ignore it. She buried herself in the work, the legal documents, the cleaning, anything that would keep her busy, keep her mind from wandering to places it shouldn't go. But it wasn't easy. It was never easy with him in the house, and she couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing, whether she wanted them to or not. Mr. Harper kept his distance. But even when he was absent, he was present in her thoughts, and that, in itself, was a problem. It was late one night, just after dinner, when it all came to a head. Jessie was cleaning the dining room, dusting the polished wood of the table. The house was quiet, the sounds of the outside world muffled by the thick walls. She had just finished wiping down the last spot on the table when she heard footsteps coming down the hall. It was Mr. Harper. He appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame, his eyes scanning the room. "Hey," he said, his voice almost too casual. Jessie didn't look up at him. "Hey." She wasn't sure what to expect. She wasn't even sure she wanted to talk to him. But there he was, standing in the doorway like he had every right to be there. She could feel his presence, the way it filled the space between them, and it made her uncomfortable. "I need to talk to you," he said, stepping into the room. "About the translation, and about us." Jessie froze, her heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean, about us?" He looked at her for a moment, and for the first time in days, his eyes softened. There was something behind them, a vulnerability she hadn't noticed before. She wasn't sure if she was ready to see it. "I don't know how to handle this," he admitted. "What's been happening between us? It's not just about the translation anymore, is it?" The question hung in the air, but Jessie couldn't bring herself to answer right away. She wasn't sure what to say. The truth was, she was scared. Scared of what this could mean. Scared of what it would do to her. I think we both know something's changed," he said, his voice quieter now. "And I don't know if I can ignore it anymore." Jessie set the rag down on the table and turned to face him, her mind racing. "I don't know what you want me to say. What do you want from me?" He shook his head, frustration creeping into his voice. "I don't want anything from you. That's not what this is about. I don't want to make this harder than it already is. But I can't keep pretending that everything is normal. I can't keep pretending that I don't notice you anymore." Jessie swallowed hard, her chest tight. His words felt like they were unraveling something inside her. Something she wasn't ready to face. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking just a little. "You think I'm just the maid. You think this doesn't matter. But it does. You've been treating me like I don't matter. Like none of this matters. And I don't know how to keep pretending." Mr. Harper's eyes widened, the shock clear on his face. He stepped closer, but this time Jessie took a step back. She couldn't let him in. Not now. Not when everything felt so fragile. "I don't think that," he said quickly, his voice almost pleading. "I never meant to make you feel that way." She shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "You don't have to mean it. You've shown me over and over again how little I matter. How little anyone like me matters to you." The words hit him like a punch. For a moment he was speechless, looking at her with wide eyes, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. But Jessie was past the point of caring about his reaction. She was past the point of pretending she didn't feel the hurt that had been building up for weeks. "You don't know me," she whispered, stepping toward him. "You don't know what it's like to be invisible, to be nothing but a tool, a servant. That's what I am to you, and I don't know how much longer I can take it." Mr. Harper stood still, his eyes on her, his face a mix of regret and confusion. The truth she had been avoiding had finally come out, and he wasn't sure how to fix it. "I never saw you like that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what happened. I never meant for things to get this complicated. But I can't stop thinking about you, Jessie, and I don't know how to make sense of it." Jessie's breath hitched, and for a moment, she didn't know what to do. She was angry, hurt, confused, and part of her wanted to walk away from him right there, to leave him standing in the middle of this house, just like she had always been, unseen. But another part of her, the part that had been buried deep inside, wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that maybe this could be something real, something more. "You need to figure this out," she said, her voice low, "because I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not." Her words hung in the air, thick with finality. Jessie turned and walked toward the door, leaving him standing there. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if he would come after her or if he would let her go. But one thing was certain. Everything was about to change. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes it's just the beginning of goodbye. The next few days felt like a quiet storm for Jessie. The house was the same, opulent, still, and eerily silent, but everything inside her had changed. The conversations that used to come easy now felt impossible. Every word she spoke to Mr. Harper felt like it weighed a ton. Every glance between them seemed to carry more unspoken tension than before. She tried to ignore the growing ache in her chest, the part of her that wanted to believe his words, that maybe he truly cared. But then she would remember how he had always treated her before this moment. She wasn't some woman he'd taken an interest in. She was just a maid. Nothing more. And she knew that deep down, no matter what he said, she would never be able to forget that. It was late, and Jessie had just finished her shift for the evening. She was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, physically. She'd barely spoken to Mr. Harper all day, and it felt like a relief. The silence gave her space to breathe, to think. But as she walked past the study, she heard something that made her pause. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see Mr. Harper through the gap, standing by his desk, his back to her. He was on the phone, but his voice was louder than usual, more tense. "I don't care what it takes. You get the job done. I don't want to hear excuses, just results. Do you understand?" He paused, listening to the person on the other end of the line. "Good. Then I expect everything to be settled by tomorrow." Jessie's heart dropped. She had never heard Mr. Harper speak like this. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something colder, harder. She wasn't sure if it was the pressure of his business or something deeper, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was tied to everything that had happened between them. She stood there for a moment longer, unsure of what to do. She had already been keeping her distance, but now, hearing him like this, he was slipping further away from her, and she hated it. Before she could turn away, the door opened, and Mr. Harper stepped out. He froze when he saw her standing there. "Jessie," he said, his voice flat. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard, trying to keep her emotions in check. "I was just walking by," she said, avoiding his gaze. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding," he said quickly, though his tone sounded defensive. I didn't expect anyone to be up this late." There was an awkward silence between them, thick and heavy. Jessie shifted on her feet, uncertain of how to respond. She could feel the distance between them, even though they were standing just feet apart. It was the kind of silence that felt loud, like a ticking clock. "I should go," she finally said, breaking the tension. "I've got a long day tomorrow." She turned to leave, but Mr. Harper stepped in her path. "Wait," he said, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "Can we talk for a minute?" Jessie felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She didn't know if she was ready for another one of these conversations, another attempt to fix what had already been broken. But she couldn't ignore the desperation in his eyes. He needed something from her. He always did. She nodded reluctantly and stepped back into the study with him. The door clicked shut behind her, and for the first time in a long while, they were truly alone. "I know I've been distant," he began, his voice a little softer now, but there was still an edge to it. "I didn't mean to push you away, Jessie. I've just been under a lot of pressure lately, and I guess I've been trying to keep everything together." Jessie crossed her arms over her chest, not sure where this was going. "I get that," she said, her voice steady. "But I don't think you've been honest with me. About anything." His expression faltered, and he lowered his gaze, like he couldn't meet her eyes. "You're right. I haven't been. I've been keeping things from you. But that doesn't mean I don't care. You have to understand that." Jessie took a slow breath, trying to keep the emotions in check. "You don't get it, Mr. Harper. I don't need you to care about me. I don't need you to try and fix things between us. What I need is for you to be honest. I need you to admit that this, whatever this is, was never supposed to happen." His face hardened at her words, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. There was no tenderness in his eyes now, only frustration. It was as though he was struggling with something he couldn't quite put into words. "I didn't ask for this either, Jessie," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't ask to feel this way about you." The words hit Jessie like a slap. She wasn't sure what to say. She had expected him to deny it, to distance himself further, but he hadn't. He had just admitted it. And that admission, it hurt more than anything he had said to her before. "I don't know what you want me to do with that," she whispered. Her voice cracked, and she turned away, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. "You've already made your choice, Mr. Harper. You've already made it clear how little I matter." "No, Jessie," he said quickly, stepping toward her. "That's not what I mean. Please, just listen." But Jessie couldn't hear him anymore. The walls had already gone up. She had already put up the armor she had spent so many years building. She couldn't let him in, not again. Not after all the times he had kept her at arm's length. "I can't do this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't keep pretending that you're going to change. I can't keep pretending that we're on the same page. I've done enough of that." And then she walked out. Jessie didn't look back as she left the study. As she walked down the hall, the pain of her own words still stinging her chest. She had thought maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more with him. But the truth was clearer now. She had been fooling herself all along. It wasn't going to happen. Not with him. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing love anyway. The days after Jessie walked out of the study were harder than she expected. The house felt quieter. The weight of her own emotions sat heavily on her shoulders, and no matter how much she tried to distract herself, her mind kept returning to that moment. The words they had exchanged, the rawness, the vulnerability, it haunted her. Mr. Harper had barely spoken to her since that night. He had stayed in his study most of the time, and Jessie had kept to her cleaning routine, almost as if they were strangers. But despite the silence, something was shifting. She could feel it in the air between them. The tension wasn't gone. It was just simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. It was late again, and Jessie had just finished her shift. She was walking down the hall toward her room when she heard the sound of the study door creaking open behind her. She froze, heart racing, and slowly turned around. Mr. Harper stood there, looking at her. His face was unreadable, but there was something about his presence that felt different this time. He wasn't the distant man he had been these past few days. His eyes were focused on her, intense, almost desperate. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Jessie's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure she was ready for another conversation, especially not with everything that had already happened. But there was something in his voice that made her pause. She couldn't ignore it. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said softly. He stepped closer, and for the first time in a while, Jessie didn't step back. There was an unspoken understanding between them now. Neither of them was running anymore. The question was, what would they do with the truth they had both been avoiding? "I've been thinking," Mr. Harper began, his hands running through his hair as if he was trying to make sense of everything, "about what you said the other night, about how I've been treating you." Jessie remained silent, waiting. The words had already been said, but hearing him acknowledge them felt different. She wasn't sure if it would make things better, but it was a step forward. A real one. "I didn't realize it," he continued, his voice strained. "I didn't realize how much I was pushing you away. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't. I've treated you like you're just part of the furniture in this house. But you're not. You're a person. You matter." Jessie's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to believe him, but another part of her was still holding on to the hurt. "You don't know what it's like," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what it feels like to be invisible, to work for someone who doesn't even see you, to think that maybe, just maybe, things could be different, and then to realize you were wrong." He closed his eyes, as if her words had struck him hard. When he opened them again, his gaze was softer, filled with regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean for you to feel that way. I should have done better. I should have treated you better from the start." Jessie swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his apology settle in her chest. She wanted to believe him, but she couldn't ignore the way things had always been between them, the way he had treated her, like she was just someone there to serve him, not someone who had feelings, who deserved respect. "I don't know if that's enough," she said, the words coming out more sharply than she meant. "You can say you're sorry, but I've been here this whole time, doing everything I can to prove that I deserve more than just sorry." Mr. Harper stepped closer, his eyes filled with frustration and something else, something deeper. "Then let me prove it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let me show you that I'm not just sorry. I want to change this. I want to make things right. I've never felt this way before, Jessie. and I know I've messed it all up, but I'm asking for a chance to fix it." For a moment, Jesse didn't know what to say. His words, the vulnerability in his eyes, it made her heart ache. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that things could change. But the fear that had built up inside her was hard to ignore. She had been hurt too many times, and every time she let her guard down, it felt like something else was ripped away from her. "You can't fix everything with words," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been waiting for you to see me, to treat me like I matter, and you haven't. And now, I don't know what to do with all this." He reached out, his hand hovering in the air between them, unsure whether to touch her or not. "I don't know what the right answer is," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I know I can't just let you go. Not now. Not after everything that's happened." Jessie's heart raced as she stared at him. The distance between them felt like it was shrinking, but it wasn't just the physical space. It was everything, the unspoken words, the fear, the vulnerability they both carried. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can believe that this time, it'll be different." He took another step forward, and this time, when he reached for her, she didn't pull away. His hand gently cupped her face, and for the first time in days, Jessie let herself feel his touch. She closed her eyes for a moment, the warmth of his hand grounding her, pulling her in. "I know I don't deserve it," he said, his voice raw, "but I'm asking you to give me a chance. A real chance. I'll do whatever it takes, Jessie. Please." Jessie's breath hitched, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to soften. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know if things could ever be the way they once were. But maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something new. Something real. She opened her eyes, looking up at him. "Okay," she whispered. "But this time, we do it right. Do you believe some people are worth the wait?" The days that followed the conversation between Jessie and Mr. Harper felt like a turning point. The house no longer felt suffocating. The silence between them wasn't heavy with unresolved tension. It was filled with the possibility of something new, something different. Mr. Harper had kept his word. He was trying, really trying, to make things right. Every day he showed up differently, not with grand gestures, but with small acts of change that slowly but surely began to chip away at the walls that had been built between them. Jessie noticed it. She noticed how he started taking the time to talk to her, to listen. They shared more than just brief exchanges in passing. They had real conversations now. And little by little, her heart began to soften again. It was early one Saturday morning, and Jessie was cleaning the kitchen. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting soft golden light across the room. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air, and Jessie hummed to herself as she wiped down the countertops. She had just finished loading the dishwasher when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around to find Mr. Harper standing in the doorway, looking at her with a hesitant smile. "I made coffee," he said, his voice quiet but warm. Jessie raised an eyebrow, surprised. She wasn't used to him making coffee. It was always a task she did when she had time. But this felt different, like a small, meaningful gesture. "That's kind of you," she said, her voice soft. "Thanks." He nodded and walked over to the counter, pouring 2 cups of coffee. He slid one toward her and sat down across from her at the small kitchen table. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sound being the soft clink of their coffee mugs against the table. Finally, Mr. Harper spoke again. "I know I've messed things up between us. I've taken you for granted. And I can't change what I've done, but I can show you that I'm committed to making things right, to showing you that I care." Jessie looked at him, her heart stirring with a mix of emotions. She had heard these words before, but this time, there was something different in his eyes. There was a sincerity there, a quiet determination that hadn't been there before. "I've been thinking about what you said," Jessie replied, her voice steady. "About not being seen. About feeling invisible." Mr. Harper's expression softened as he listened. "I don't want to feel invisible anymore," she continued. "And I don't want to be the person who settles for being treated like I don't matter. "You don't have to settle, Jesse," he said, his voice firm. "Not with me. I won't make the same mistakes again." She stared at him for a moment, the vulnerability between them palpable. She had every reason to walk away, to never look back, but something inside her shifted. She could feel it, the change not just in him but in herself too. Maybe they had both been lost, but maybe they had found each other in the process. Later that evening, they sat together on the front porch. The sky had turned a deep shade of purple, and the first stars of the evening were beginning to twinkle. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth, the kind of night that felt peaceful yet full of possibilities. Mr. Harper sat next to her, his arm resting on the back of the chair. He didn't need to say anything, just being there felt like enough. It was as if the quiet moments between them had started to matter more than anything else. "I've been thinking about us," he said after a long pause, his voice gentle. "About what happens next. I know things won't be perfect, but I want to take it one day at a time. And I want you to be a part of that." Jessie glanced at him, searching his face for any trace of doubt or hesitation. But all she saw was a quiet honesty that made her heart swell. "I want that too," she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. I think we can make it work, if we're both willing to try." They sat in silence again, the world around them still, as if holding its breath. Jessie wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. There was no rush, no pressure. They were both healing slowly together, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, Jessie's life began to shift. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She wasn't just the woman in the background. She was someone who mattered, someone who had a voice, a choice. Mr. Harper kept his promises. He took the time to listen, to understand, to truly see her. He made sure she knew she was valued, not just as an employee, but as a person. And in turn, Jessie started to open up more. She shared her dreams, her fears, the things she had kept hidden for so long. They grew closer, not just as employer and maid, but as two people learning to love and trust each other again. One evening, after a long day, Jessie sat on the couch, her feet up, a book in her lap. Mr. Harper came into the room, looking at her with a slight smile. He had always been a man of few words, but tonight, there was something different in his gaze. "I'm glad you're here," he said simply. Jessie smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She closed her book and set it aside, reaching for his hand. "Me too," she said softly. "I think we're finally getting it right." And for the first time, she believed it. They were getting it right. The quiet moments, the small gestures, those were the things that mattered most. Love, after all, wasn't about grand declarations or perfect timing. It was about showing up every day in the small, simple ways. It was about learning, growing, and forgiving. As they sat together, hand in hand, Jessie knew that no matter what had happened in the past, they were on the right path now. The next morning, they went for a walk around the property, the grass beneath their feet and the early morning sunlight bathing the world in golden light. There were no more secrets, no more distance between them. They were moving forward together, and that was all that mattered. Mr. Harper stopped for a moment, turning to her with a smile. "I'm not going to mess this up, Jessie. I promise." Jessie smiled back, her heart full of hope. "I believe you," she said. And with that, they walked forward together, ready for whatever the future might hold. They had both come a long way. But in the end, it wasn't about how far they'd come. It was about the love they had found, and the choice to keep building it, one day at a time. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.